I salvaged this antique stacking bookcase about a year ago and I fixed it up and I really like it, but I really want more shelves. Now I've looked and antique bookcases like this are readily available on Facebook Marketplace or on eBay, but let's just say the prices don't match my budget. So until I find another one that I can salvage like I did with this one, I'm just going to see what I can make. For those who haven't seen my previous video, this is what's known as a Barrister's bookcase or a stackable bookcase or an elastic bookcase. This particular brand is by the Globe Wernicke company and it dates to somewhere around 1900 to 1920. And as you can see, it's designed in modules so you can add on to it and have as many as you want. And that's what I want. I want more modules. I'm just planning to make an open shelf unit because if you want to add this flip door, well, you really need the specialized hardware that comes with the original units. And yeah, I know you can find the hardware online also if you wanted to like rebuild the whole thing, but that's only if you're okay with spending like 50 bucks for one knob. So here's what I think are the challenges. Now, first of all, and maybe this seems obvious, but clearly it's got to match this in width so that it's the exact same dimension for stacking. On the top of each unit, you got this one board that runs down the middle, and that board nestles into the bottom of the unit above. And then the unit above has got two boards with a gap in between, which is where the top board will fit into. But more than that, this front board, let's see if I can get it in the camera, it's recessed, it's got a deep cove in it. And I was puzzled about that for a while, but then I realized that that cove is where the top of the door sort of curves into as you're opening it. Now I'm like, oh, I'm not going to have a door on the one that I'm making, so I don't need to worry about that. But I do need to worry about that because I'm going to stack it on top of a unit that does have a door. And again, looking at this board that's on the top of the unit, you'll see it goes right flush with the edge. Like, well, how do you hide that? It's like, well, these shelves all have this thin metal strap here, and when you put this on top, and that hides the edge of the board. I don't have these metal straps. Like I said, you can buy the hardware, but it's really expensive and generally only available in the States, so I would have to deal with cross-border issues and currency issues and all of that. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to try to find some metal and bend it to fit, or if I'm going to like fake it in wood. I'm really not a metal worker, but looking again at the bottom of the unit, here's those two boards and here's the gap in between, and this is some very thin plywood which makes up the inside bottom. It's certainly, I don't think it's quite a 1/4 inch thick, somewhere between 1/8 of an inch and a 1/4 inch. That's pretty thin. I could make that thicker, that would probably be okay, but okay, I've seen the challenges, but I think we can handle this, so let's just press on and get to it. I think I'm going to start with the piece of wood that needs to sit there. I think that's kind of the complicated one, so let's get that out of the way. As I was planning this out, I was realizing this is not just a straight cove, because if you look at it, there's a straight edge here that goes down about that much, and then it curves up here, and then there's a little flat part of again. And the piece is a little bit over 3 inches. So yeah, it actually comes out to about there. And you can see how the door sort of curves through the area. So I think I'm going to set aside the idea of the curve for now, because I wonder if I can just sort of make a U-shaped channel in a board. So I've got a piece of ash here. I'm going to plane that and joint that, and then I'll bring the camera back in. And there we go, a nice piece of ash. And while I was at it, I had an old maple tabletop that I prepared for the secondary wood because that wood's not as important. So these boards and these boards I can make out of maple for putting things together, but this board is going to be visible, so I have to make that a nice one, even though this is all still an experiment. Okay, I took my nice board and I've propped it up here. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put a pencil here, and then I'm going to see just how much of this board do I need to cut out. There's a little notch here with some felt. I'm going to sort of put the pencil in here, and let's just open the door while I'm pressing on the board. Ooh, that's cool. Well, that should be what I need to get out. But that tells me that here and here it can be flat, so this just be cut out with a dado blade, I bet, and it would look fine. So I just threw the dado blade on here. It's, you know, about 5/8 of an inch. I didn't really worry about the width because we're going to be taking multiple cuts. But now let's set the maximum depth. And then the cut is going to be like that. See, yep, I should be able to just take a cut and then reverse it. And there we go. So let me try it on the actual piece. Hold it and, oh, wait. There's a little catch there. I've got the piece positioned here, and then I can see that this little piece of felt is just catching there. So I just need to take off that corner. I could do that with a quick little chamfer maybe with the router. Or I can just pull out a block plane because I think I can just knock this down quickly. And with that chamfer here along the back, let's put this and see how that nicely clears it. That is awesome. Boy, that was solved quickly and easily. I mean, ignoring the hardware, which I don't have, so I have to ignore it. That coved piece, along with the metal working on the edge, was the parts that I thought was going to be the most challenging about that build, but that was solved really quickly and simply. So those 3 boards that I prepared, I want to round over the faces on them. Let me show you why. Just a reminder, this are the 3 boards that I'm planning to duplicate, and these all have a bit of a rounding on this side, which makes sense because you want to be able to slip things down here without them catching. But also, this piece has a nice rounded edge because it serves as the front, and then on a shelf that also serves as the front edge here. So it has this nice round over here, and I want to duplicate that as best I can. So I've got my largest roundover bit in my router table, but I have it set a bit below the top edge of the table, so we're just going to do like a little bit of a roundover, and then so you'll run each board, flip it over and run it again. I've done so on a test board already, and it does a pretty fair job of rounding over the front. I want to work on these end panels next, and I'm going to cheat a little bit. I already have some large panels which are ash or oak. These are from an old church pew set that a friend gave me some years ago. I used them for something else, so they're kind of salvaged, but I need something about 12 inches tall by 11 inches wide, which I should have plenty to get out of these boards. These old pew pieces have a nice thick end on it, which is thicker than I want. Looking at the shelf sides, you can see that they do have this thicker piece here, but it's not that thick. This is actually about 7/8 of an inch. So I want to cut it off like this, but that's a little bit of a sketchy situation. So I've got this jig, which is actually meant for cutting angles, but what it has here is it has a nice tall face that I can attach my piece to. I think actually I'm going to clamp it and slide the whole thing. I've also put an older blade in my saw because I have a feeling that I might hit a nail as I go along here. So let's get this clamped into place. Make sure these clamps are well above where the saw blade's going to hit. Also have a feather board here to make sure it stays pressed against it. And I think that should work okay. That worked awesome. These pieces were here and now they're gone. Now this part I want to cut off too, so we'll work on that next. And I didn't hit a nail, which is awesome. A little bit of chisel work and a little bit of shoulder plane work, and hopefully we can clean this up. So that turned out even better than I thought. And now I need to repeat that with the other piece, but I'll do that off screen. And then I ran these over the router table so they would have the same curve on the front as the other pieces. I'm about to run a piece of plywood through my planer. I've never ever done that before. Now I recently converted to a helical head, so it should be able to handle it, but I've still never ever done it before. The thing is I need a piece of 3/8 plywood for the back. Plywood that I was planning on using is like only half that. If this goes terribly, it's not even going to make it into the video. So if you're seeing this, then I think it worked. And the carbide blades did not disappoint. I got exactly the thickness I want, along with a whole pile of shavings. This back piece needs to be set into a rabbet here in the back edge of the side. So I set the dado blade up in my table saw, and then I added a sacrificial fence to the table saw, set the width, and then I could run the pieces through. So I'm a little nervous about this, but I think it's time to start putting it all together. So to try to help me with accuracy, what I've done, I've positioned the piece that I'm copying on the back side of my assembly table, and then I've stood the two sides up and I have them clamped carefully into place, and I've been measuring to make sure that they are the right distance. Now I need to position this front to back so that it lines up with where this is. And reminder, this old antique is factory furniture. It's assembled with nails. I'm going to use some brads to hold it, but then I'm going to put some screws in. And now to flip it and do the same on the bottom. And then after a bunch of careful measuring, we have the other side taken care of, and they're also screwed into position. And now this goes like that. And the top goes like that. And that fits together even better than I was hoping for. I mean, there's still a bunch to do. I need a bottom, I need a back, and we need the metal strapping, but this is looking great. I think this is going to work out just fine. So I take my new shelf section and I lay it on the front. And here's that piece of plywood I planed down, and that fits nicely here, but I've got these square edges here that I need to deal with now. If you look here at the actual shelf, the back sticks up, but there's a angle to it. It's been sort of rabbited away a little. So I was thinking about an angled cut on the table saw, or maybe a double rabbiting bit, but I went looking through my router stash and I found this router bit that I have, which is meant for doing sort of raised panels on the side, and it pretty much fits. Looks like it goes nicely along there. So I'm going to set up my router table and try this bit. Made a bunch of test cuts, getting it dialed in properly, and took it over and compared it to the actual piece, and I think I've got it right. It is a very big bit, a very deep cut, and so I want to make sure I keep my hands well away from it. The first cut is going across the grain, so it's really splintering out. I'm going to have to cut the fibers first. Let me hang on a second. So I guess I do need to involve the table saw in this after all. So I've got it set to take a very shallow cut, just like that. I tested it on this piece of scrap, so it will cut the fibers of the wood before the router table goes along. And I did also glue and tape in those little bits that got splintered out, even though that's going to be the back. Well, that sounded horrible during the first cut. I kept hearing chunks flying off, and I'm just like, I'm committed now. I've got to go through with it, but it turned out beautiful. So those chunks that were flying off were all from the inside. I got a nice clean cut all the way along. The other side, the face of the plywood, if you will, that was fine. I didn't have any issues at all with that, but that was going with the grain of the face. Now I really want to attach the back and then get going on the inside bottom, but then I realized I've got to stop now because the sides are dark, but the insides are not. So I have to stop now and get some dark stain on the parts that need dark stain before I get the back and the bottom in there. I had to go look at my previous video, and what I used there was a red mahogany 225 from Minwax on the base, and then I also put some dark walnut over top of it, but when I had just done the dark walnut by itself, I found it too dark, and so yeah, I'm trying to match an existing piece now. So complicating matters is that this is wood that I'm reusing. So this has had a stain on it before. I've sanded it down, but there's most definitely still some stain deep in the pores of this. So everything's an experiment. Part of me wants it to look at least a little bit different because I don't want to look like I'm cheating, if you will. I mean, I'm trying to make something that looks good alongside this antique. I'm not trying to make it look like an antique. And you'll have to excuse me, I've got the exhaust fan on, but a few minutes later, I come back and wipe off the excess. And back here, I've got the piece that I'm trying to match. Now this, of course, looks glossy because it's got some top coat, but I'm pretty happy with what I've got so far on here. I don't think I'm going to actually add any dark walnut. This newer piece of wood here, this has got a slightly different color to it. I might add some walnut here. I'm going to put the back on just with screws to begin with, no glue, just because I want to be able to take it off if necessary. So I've prepared a thin piece of plywood for the bottom and cut it to size. That's going to go in and fit there. And then I realized that I stained the inside, but if we look at the other shelf actually has a plywood liner on the side which matches the bottom and, more importantly, goes from dark to light. So I went ahead and prepared some more of the same plywood, and I think I'm going to put that on there because I like the idea of the lighter inside. So that means I didn't have to stain this, and in fact I'm going to have to... Just like in the original, this is going to be nailed into place. Now it's time to work on the metal strapping. I bought this aluminum flat bar, which is 1 inch by 1/16 of an inch. The original strapping is also about 1 inch tall. The nice thing about aluminum is that it's soft, so it should be easy to bend into shape, and I can cut it with woodworking tools. The strap goes along the side, and then it sort of zigzags out here because there's just this little ridge. I think this might be the tricky part. So I've already practiced on my first bend, and it turned out great. I'll show you how I do that in a moment. But I'm going to latch that onto here, and then I'll make a mark there. And I'm using my tail vise because it's got a nice long flat surface. So I'm going to fit this in here, make sure I'm square. And I've got this long board so it provides pressure all the way along, and then I'm just going to bend it over. And then let's, now this fits right there. And then the first thing I'm going to do is do another corner to make that little zigzag that I need. I'm a little afraid that this other bend is just going to straighten out when I try to put this zigzag in here. I don't know. What I think I'm going to try doing is scoring along here to try to encourage it to bend there. Careful, I don't want to break it. All right, there's a bit of a zigzag. That is pretty darn good. And now one more bend. Just sort of, there we go. And then my little piece of aluminum goes like that. And I just need to make a cut right there. And aluminum is soft, so I just took it over to my strip sander and I cleaned up the end to put a nice curve on it. I also just need to make it a bit skinnier at this end. So I'm using this piece of wood as kind of an anvil. Let's see. And the front edge is curved, so I want to try to follow the shape. Well, it's got a nice curve on it. And over here, hey, I can't complain. That's really good. And that whole thing is looking pretty good. I need to make another one. And through the magic of video, here's the second one. Are they identical? Of course not. Are they good enough? You bet they are. That second one fits like that. And the other one, they're enough identical that I could swap them if I wanted to. The aluminum is way too shiny and silver, so I'm going to hit it now with some black spray paint, which hopefully will help it blend in with the other metal straps. Off screen, I applied a top coat to my new shelf, and I used one of my favorites, which is this min-waxed oil modified polyurethane, which despite the name is water-based. Gives a nice amber tone to here where it was a clear coat. But yeah, the original is quite a bit darker on the inside, which is, you know, it's 100 years older than this one. This is the original. Here's the new one. I think the match is pretty good. And so I think the final step now is to apply these metal straps that I made. Looking at the original antique, I can see that the straps protrude just a little bit below the wood. So I've got these little thin spacers just to lift things up to give me the clearance that I need. These are just attached with nails, but I want to pre-drill the holes, but I have to be careful because there's little spots where I can't put the nail. So let me get that figured out for a moment. Just some little nails that I also spray painted black on the heads of those. Being a little bit more careful with the front. Only want to drill in a little bit because I want to make sure there's something for the nail to bite in. Like that. So now let's put it all together. Got the base down first, and then I'm going to put my unit as the bottom unit. And that nestles there. And then another 10-inch unit. And then an 8-inch unit. And now the top. Now if I open the glass doors, and as a display shelf, more often than not, I do have the glass doors open. Now, that looks like a unit. On this side, I think it's fairly obvious that this is a new piece, but I think a lot of that just has to do with the grain of the wood. I mean, these are fairly tight grained pieces of white oak, very tight and straight grained. This is either ash or red oak, and the grain is much more open, and you got this piece going on there. The straps blend in really well. I was wondering, but this black paint against this, whatever this is, looks pretty good. On the other side, the grain is a bit calmer, more just plain straight grain, and I think that actually blends in quite nicely. This will be the side that's more viewed just for the way I have it laid out in my house. But anyways, and I think I've already said it once, but I wasn't looking for perfection. I wasn't trying to make a copycat. I don't want anybody to think that I'm trying to fake that that's an antique. I wanted another shelf, and I thought it would be fun to see just how much I could duplicate the old construction and end up with something that matches. And I think I've done that really well. I still would love to come across some hardware someday, and then I would attempt making a door from it, or, you know, just find another salvage unit that I can fix up. But that turned out great. That's it for this one. We'll see you on the next one.